Hey, special educators. Welcome to Teach, Taskbox, Inspire, the podcast dedicated to making your job as a special education teacher easier by making your instruction more fun for you and your students. Inside each episode, you'll learn how to get the most use out of your task boxes in the classroom. I'm your host, Lisa Holliday from Chalkboard Superhero, a veteran special education teacher passionate about empowering you with purposeful teaching strategies, helpful tips and tricks, and other classroom management tools that will help you thrive in your role. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey there, special education teachers, and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Taskbox, Inspire. I'm your host, Lisa Holliday, and I am so glad you're here. Whether you're listening on your way to school, while prepping materials, or just taking a well-deserved break, I so appreciate you spending this time with me. Today, we're diving into an essential classroom strategy that can make a huge impact on student behavior: visual boundaries. If you've ever had students who struggle with staying in their seat, getting distracted easily, or having difficulty understanding classroom expectations, this episode is for you. Visual boundaries are a simple yet powerful tool that really help maintain focus, reduce distractions, and support positive behavior. I'll be breaking down what they are, what they look like, and practical ways you can implement them in your classroom. Let's get started. So, what the heck are visual boundaries and why do they work? So, visual boundaries are physical or visual cues that help students understand where they should be, how they should move, and what expectations exist in a space. So, why do they work? They work because, number one, they provide clear, consistent structure for students who struggle with attention or sensory processing, right? They also reduce overstimulation and distractions by visually defining spaces. And also, they support students with autism, ADHD, or really other learning differences by giving them concrete, predictable guidelines. So think of it like this. If you've ever been to a grocery store and seen the checkout line taped on the floor, that's a visual boundary. It helps people know where to stand and keep the flow of the movement organized, especially if you remember that during COVID. I remember walking into Walmart during COVID and they had like arrows up and down the aisles, and it really was a visual way to represent where you needed to be at all times. So this kind of helped, the flow of movement and keeping people organized. So in a classroom, the same idea applies. We use visual boundaries to create clear expectations and limit unnecessary distractions. Let's go over some examples of what visual boundaries look like. Let's talk about carpet or tape markers for personal space. So placing colored tape on a carpet or using carpet squares on a floor to kind of define student seating really helps prevent crowding or arguments about personal space. So if you have a bunch of tables and you want students to understand not to get into Johnny or Sarah's space, you might want to use tape on the tables. If the students are all sitting on the carpet and Johnny is just lying all over the carpet, you might want to put a carpet square or tape off a box on the carpet so Johnny knows exactly where Johnny needs to be sitting. This really works great for those morning meetings or circle time, or even lining up at the door. Having those little markers on the floor helps them know where to line up. All right, so using desk dividers or privacy folders helps students too. A lot of students work best with fewer distractions. So using dividers or those privacy folders during independent work times really helps with this. Or if you can get your hands on like a study carrel, I think is what they're called. They're those wooden desks that have like the sides up on them or right in front. That helps kind of I'm like waving my hands over here like you can see, but it really helps students understand the space that they're given and helps reduce those distractions. So if a permanent divider isn't an option, using file folders or standing whiteboards can really help create that sense of separation as well. So another way we can do this is using clearly labeled centers or workstations. If you have color-coded signs or taped off areas or visual labels, this really helps students navigate independent centers. So if you have the writing center is in blue and if you have a huge sign for this, it really helps identify the space and uses it as a visual boundary. If you have a reading corner or a sensory station or just really a quiet work area, visual boundaries make it clear where students should go and what's expected. A way that I like to break this off is to use the furniture that you have in your classroom to create those visual boundaries. So if you do have a sensory area, you can use a bookshelf or a filing cabinet or movable walls in the classroom to create that visual boundary. And I have a blog post all about this and how you can make movable walls within your classroom, and I can leave those in the show notes. All right, another way that you can do this is hallway and transition boundaries. So using floor markers or dots or even footprints, I've seen that a lot of people use footprints on the floor to really show the students where to stand in line or how to transition through the hallways. This is especially helpful for younger students in the preschool level or in kindergarten who struggle with transitions. I do try to not use those for students who love to pick at things, because anything that I put on the floor, if I have a student who is a picker, those things no longer are on the floor. They will come off the floor immediately. So I try to kind of read the room and understand the students that I have. All right. Special areas for breaks and calming spaces. So having a defined calm down or break space with clear boundaries lets students know where they can go and if they need a sensory break. So a rug, a beanbag chair, or a small partitioned area can create a space that feels safe or structured, or really just separate from the rest of the classroom. My classroom that I had last year that was very specific to an autism classroom or autism students, I used all of the gym mats or they're foldable mats that we used. I used those to block off sections within the classroom all of the time, especially in the calm down space. All right, let's talk about strategies for using boundaries to reduce distractions and improve behavior. I know that we've covered what visual boundaries are and what they look like in the classroom, but let's talk about how to use them. So, number one, you need to explicitly teach these expectations. Students need to hear, see, and practice how to use these boundaries. You want to spend time modeling the purpose of each of these boundaries. For example, if you have taped off centers, walk the students through how to enter, how to exit, how to stay within their assigned space. If you do not go over that, they're not going to know how to use those. Number two, reinforce boundaries with visual cues. So you want to pair all of these physical boundaries with picture cues or written instructions. The written instructions I use a lot for any substitute that you're going to have in your classroom. So for instance, at an independent work area, post a visual reminder that says, stay in your spot, use a whisper voice, raise your hand if you need help. So these little reminders help students stay on task without constant verbal redirection. All right, number three, make boundaries a positive tool, not a restriction. Some students may resist boundaries if they see them as a punishment rather than a helpful tool. Present them in a positive light by emphasizing how they create a space for better focus, better movement, and better independence. So for example, instead of saying, you have to sit in this taped off area, you want to try, this is your special space where you can do your best work. And you can pair it with visual. All right, number four, adjust as needed for individual students' needs. You guys, not every student is the same, and you're not going to have the same batch of students every single year. Every year you need to adjust. Some may thrive with clear, defined boundaries, while others may be fine with more flexibility. You want to observe how students respond to it and adjust where and how you're going to use these visual boundaries. So just like I was talking about that one student who always was a picker, he picked off all the things everywhere. Picked off things off the wall, off the floor, off the desks. It drove me crazy. So you want to make sure that you're adjusting as necessary. So here's my closing thoughts. Visual boundaries are one of the most simple yet most effective tools for supporting visual focus and independence in the classroom. Whether you're using tape for personal space, desk dividers for reducing those distractions, or labels for clearly defined centers, these strategies help students understand expectations and they feel more confident in their learning environment. So tell me, which of these visual boundary strategies are you excited to try? Do you have a favorite way to use them in a classroom? Also, if I didn't mention one here, please reach out to me. I would love to share with all the other teachers who are waiting and listening to these episodes. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. Until next time, guys, bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Teach, Taskbox, Inspire. I hope you've gained some tips and motivation to fuel your week ahead. If you're ready to explore more strategies for empowering your students as independent learners, be sure to dive into my free training at chalkboardsuperhero.com/training. And don't keep all this knowledge to yourself. Share this episode with your special education teacher friends who could use some motivation and inspiration. One more thing before you go. If you're finding this podcast helpful and want to show support, head to Apple Podcasts and leave your rating and review. Until next time, keep teaching, taskboxing, and inspiring.